Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everybody, to everyone from everyone at Game On Wisconsin. We got a special treat tonight. We have Tyler Dunne of the Go Long, whatever we're going to call it. Boys and girls, let's hit it. And we are here and live, everybody. Welcome to the show today, a special edition of a Game On Wisconsin podcast. I'm going with a titleless one because we don't have a specific one for this. I have Tyler Dunne here with me, formerly of Bleacher Report, Packer Report, any type of report and publication you can think of. You guys probably know him best from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel when he used to be with the great and legendary Bob McGinn, now the owner and the founder of the Go Long, whatever it is that we're calling that right now. Tyler, I got to tell you, if I wrote down a bucket list of people I wanted to sit down and chat with, you're on a short list right up there with like Adam Shine. So thank you for joining me. Two Syracuse grads, obviously, right there. So I got to find out a way to get Shine on here with you sometime, obviously. But thanks for joining me. It's a thrill.
Oh, Jake, man, it's great to be here. Shine is the best. Love that guy. And the pleasure's all here, man. I feel bad for you if that's your bucket list. I'm sorry, but that I'm in there. I feel like you could shoot a little higher, but you know what? I'll do my best. It's great to be here. I know we text, we DM, we email, and it's great to see you in person in these COVID times. Best we can.
That it is. It's been about 6 years. We met, like I said, here pre-show about 6 years ago. During the draft, I was interning at Packer Report, and you had the misfortune of sitting behind me. And if I remember, I think it was you and Paul Immig, formerly of Fox Sports at the time. I was with Bill Huber of Packer Report, now of obviously Maven Sports Illustrated. And we just kind of met and connected there. For those that don't remember, that was the Clinton Dix and Davante Adams draft. So a good one for the Packers. Yeah. Obviously, Clinton Dix not on the team anymore, but had a couple good seasons with the team. And then obviously Davante Adams is Davante Adams, and we'll get into him a little bit as we get in here with Tyler. But Tyler, tell the people, if they've lived under a rock for the last 10 years or so, where you've been, how you've gotten to the point where you're at now, and tell us a little bit about Go Long, which I am a subscriber to, and I can tell you guys it's $7 a month. That's not even a lunch. So, I mean, that's like old school days. That was like the McDonald's dollar menu lunch. So I cannot recommend it enough. The first story that I ever read off of the publication was the Josh Allen, Doug Whaley story that you had, and some of the stuff that went into them talking about Patrick Mahomes, oddly enough, which I'm going to get into a little bit with you as well, because you did say that Patrick Mahomes was the 2020 NFL MVP a couple days ago. So we're going to ask about that later on, and I'll get your take on that. But tell us a little bit about that. And then, of course, we'll get into the Jordan Love succession plan story.
No doubt. Yeah, just launched Go Long. I guess we can call it a newsletter publication, because it's kind of both, right? The way that Substack, my platform, approaches it is everybody's in their email, everybody's refreshing their email all day. That's basically the app for Go Long. Every story that I write goes right to your email inbox when you sign up. You can sign up for the free email list, and you'll get occasional stories. But if you subscribe, like you said, for a cup of coffees a month, you get every feature, every profile. I'm doing Q&As. We have a podcast. I'm going to mix in a bunch of analysis as well right there. And also you can go to golongtd.com, just like my initials and touchdown. So a lot of places to get it. And I just felt like the right time. You know, I just think that where sports media is today, you know, a lot of companies pivoting, going different directions, companies going under, people consuming stories on different platforms in different ways. Nothing's guaranteed wherever you are. And a lot of people have been like, you know, Tyler, why are you taking this risk? To me, it's not a risk. You know, when you're betting on yourself and you're doing the job the way you think it should be done. You know, I mean, we both are on social media. You kind of see the way the sport is covered. I mean, a lot of nonsense, a lot of bullshit, a lot of GIFs, a lot of memes, a lot of I don't know. You know what? Maybe I'm just not funny enough, Jake, to live in that world and live in that society. That could be the case as well. But I just want to try to humanize this game. You know, I feel like 10 plus years covering this game. I've got a lot of relationships with players, with coaches, with scouts. Felt confident in a place to kind of take this plunge into doing the whole league through a long form lens. And that's really the approach with Go Long, is to be enterprising, just try to tell a story that you can't read anywhere else. So I appreciate you subscribing. It was awesome to see your name pop up. And after rambling about Go Long that long, like quick cliff notes to answer your question. I mean, I'm from Western New York, went to college, first at St. John Fisher, tried to extend the playing career, playing football, quarterback in high school, not a quarterback in college, was a linebacker. It didn't go well. Just, you know, there's a lot of talent in D3. I think people would be shocked. Obviously, the goal all along was journalism, to be a sports writer. That's all I ever wanted to do. So I transferred to Syracuse, to Newhouse. And from there, it was awesome, you know, covering those teams. Went down to Fayetteville Observer, covered some high school sports. Boom, went out there to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Working with Bob McGinn was amazing. Tom Silverstein, Lori Nickel, everybody out there. Bob was kind of a Green Bay dad. I remember spending that first Christmas with his family because the Packers played Christmas Day that year. Couldn't fly home to Buffalo. It was awesome. I mean, the fans out there, I don't got to tell you, your listeners, I mean, they feel like your boss. I mean, you could write a story about the fourth string tight end and they go nuts. It's incredible. I mean, I nothing but great things to say about the readers. I mean, I have so many friends out there that I keep in touch with to this day. Maybe you know Kyle Cousineau. He pops up on Twitter a lot in your feed, probably.
The mayor.
One of my closest friends in Green Bay. I mean, we get beers all the time. So amazing experience. Flew back to Buffalo, worked at the Buffalo News for a year, Bleacher Report calls, write features for them for 4.5 years, and they decided to go to a different direction. So I launched Go Long, and here we are. I couldn't be more pumped about it.
And like he mentioned, he said it was a couple of cups of coffee. If you guys are Starbucks drinkers, Mike McCarthy used to always make a joke of he struggled to pay, you know, $5 for a cup of coffee that was halfway filled up with foam. So really, it's like one cup of coffee if you're a Starbucks. Or my wife, it really is like one cup of coffee. So it really isn't much. So feel free, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get plenty of good stuff in there. The podcast that you just mentioned, actually, I don't know if it has launched yet. I'm a little behind on some of my stuff, but you have Jonathan Taylor, formerly of the Wisconsin Badgers, coming up soon too, correct?
You got that right. Yeah, we should do a little teasing on here, right? So that will actually be a story. I did talk to him, but I'll be writing a story on just kind of his rookie year. I think we all kind of thought that he hit that rookie wall, right? I mean, for a good month, he's getting 3-4 carries a game. In the doghouse, not really a part of the offense, and boom, all of a sudden he's the guy that could change everything that we thought we knew about the AFC. I mean, he's a workhorse. I'm sure all of your listeners, viewers, they remember those Madison days, and we're seeing that player again. So I got to know Jonathan a little bit during the pre-draft process. We did a story at Bleacher Report on him, so it was great to kind of pick up where we left off, and that will be coming out. You know, I was going to put it out this week, but, you know, with the holidays and such, I figured, you know what, well, he'll probably dominate another game. Dominate another week. Let's put it out next week so they can keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, big one coming up this Sunday for them against the Pittsburgh Steelers, right, who are kind of scuffling a little bit. So it could be a big opportunity for him to kind of, like you mentioned, change the landscape of the AFC. And really, he could run the Colts to a division title if the Packers are able to give them a little bit of assistance and beat the Tennessee Titans on Sunday. And let's move to those Green Bay Packers. They are obviously taking on the Titans this weekend. They are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They control their destiny. They need to win one game. If they win next week, week 17 against the Chicago Bears, they are the number 1 seed in the NFC, regardless of what happens around them. Sunday, if the Rams beat the Seattle Seahawks, the Packers will be playing for the number 1 seed when they take the field against the Tennessee Titans, and that can be wrapped up. If that happens, we could see Jordan Love taking his first start or first snaps as a Packer against the Chicago Bears in week 17. And you recently, your first story about the Packers for Go Long was about their succession plan. And in parentheses, it says, and it's brilliant. And we'll get to that in just a second. But what I want to know is about your creative process and the writing process and how that happens, because we live in, you mentioned social media, a lot of hot takes, a lot of nonsense, a lot of bullshit, all that other stuff, and how that process happens. And so when did you start thinking about this story, brainstorming this story, and how did you get to figure out, hey, I want to talk to Jordan Love and A.J. Dillon and Jay Sternberger and Alan Lazard? Or does that happen organically through the process? How does that all take place for you to get into this whole story?
I think the light bulb kind of goes off, at least, subconsciously. It wasn't like I just kind of sat down and was like, this needs to be a story. But I mean, the night of the draft, we were all watching this strange COVID draft wherever we were. And when they took a quarterback, traded up for a quarterback, let's not forget that part of it too. I think we were all just stunned, shocked. It was instant. The outrage, it was almost like people were offended. How could they do this? How could the Packers, a game away from the Super Bowl, do this to this team, to Aaron Rodgers? Like, how dare they? It was universal, really. I didn't see much support for this pick in the moment anywhere. And I apologize if you were, frontline supporting it, saying this was a genius plan. But I just kind of like, did people forget what this team does? This is just what the Packers do, and it's different. It's something that other teams are afraid to do. When you really look at when quarterbacks are drafted in the first round, they play right away everywhere. I think there's been 44 drafted in the first round since 2001. 33 have played by their 10th game, started by their 10th game. Aaron Rodgers was the 49th game. The next closest was Phillip Rivers, the 33rd game, because he's winning behind Drew Brees. So it just doesn't happen. But I think the Packers just had that luxury. They were in a position where, okay, look, we've got this really, really good team. All right. The quarterback position is a zillion times more important than anything else. I don't know. Say what you want about Jordan Love. That's another conversation, another debate. But they believe in him. And if you nail that pick, you're set up for an entire generation of quarterback play, an entire generation of it's unbelievable. Really, you could really have a half century of great quarterback play if this works out. And let's not forget that Ted Thompson was a scout on Ron Wolf's staff in 1992 when he did that with Brett Favre. Makes a trade that everybody hated at the time. Don Mikowski led the NFL in passing, I think, 2 years before that. And then Brian Gutekunst, he's a scout under Ted Thompson. When they're at that shareholders meeting and people are going up to Ted Thompson asking him to sign a petition, how come you're not bringing Brett Favre back? He just brought you within a throw of the Super Bowl. It's like, I don't know. I get it. The difference in that Favre hinted at retirement here and there. Aaron Rodgers hasn't necessarily done that, but he is an aging quarterback. You don't know when he's going to start fading or when you're going to see that decline. And I think you'd rather catch a quarterback doing this when your other quarterback's doing this instead of, down here somewhere. That's kind of where New England is right now, right? What are they going to do at quarterback this offseason? So if the worst case scenario is that Aaron Rodgers wins MVP in 2020 and you're stuck with an MVP quarterback for 2 or 3 more years, I think the Packers would be okay with that and trade Jordan Love 3 years down the line. But I for that reason alone, it's genius because guess what? If you're going to piss off Aaron Rodgers, that's a good thing. He plays better when he's pissed off, and they know Aaron Rodgers better than anybody.
And I would say this, because everybody right now, hindsight analysis, you mentioned all the stuff that goes on with how this game is covered. Hindsight analysis is another thing that is the king in today's day and age. And for everybody saying, how could you have thought after last season that Aaron Rodgers is washed up? I think if you go back and watch, especially towards the end of the season, if you go from December through the playoff game, a few exceptions, he played well in that playoff game against Seattle, obviously. But if you watch the San Francisco playoff game, obviously, where they got drilled in the NFC Championship game, kind of got overshadowed because of the run defense and everything that happened there. Or really the game that sticks out to me in my head is Week 17 against Detroit, where I thought he was legitimately really bad for 3.5 to almost the entire game. It was reasonable to believe that Aaron Rodgers was starting to decline. And you mentioned what New England was going to do. I look into maybe the idea of, the Giants hanging on to Eli Manning for far too long. The Packers, to some degree, kind of hanging on to Brett Favre for far too long at that point as well. If you really think about it, that Renaissance season in 2007 with Brett Favre came after 2-3 seasons of subpar quarterback play. It was just Brett Favre was a different level of deity in Green Bay at the time. So take me back to that. You were covering the team at the time when that happened, when they made the pick. And then obviously, were you in Green Bay during the summer of Favre when they traded him?
Yes. Good call, man. That's kind of, Yeah, that was a summer I'll never forget. So 2 summers in a row in college. I lived out in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Actually, one summer in Green Bay, Wisconsin, one summer in Shawano, Wisconsin, just a little north, writing for the Packer Report, first alongside Todd Korth and then Bill Hubert, who you also worked with there. And then at the Shawano Leader with Corey Dellenbach. It was a great daily newspaper, gave me a great experience. So that second summer was the craziness. And you want to talk about just learning how to cover an NFL team on the fly. I mean, I'm just, I had hair then. I don't have hair now.
Doesn't now.
No beard then.
It's all on his face.
But I mean, I learned a lot every day, just kind of being thrown into the ruckus. And, I mentioned that shareholders meeting, being there, seeing these fans just going up to Ted like that. I mean, me and Corey, we waited at the airport for Favre's plane to arrive one day. I mean, training camp, the fans booing Aaron Rodgers every day. It was surreal. I mean, it was an unbelievable experience just to kind of see in real time. Like, I mean, that's one of the biggest storylines in all of sports and in all of our lifetime. And I mean, we'll never forget. Like, you're right, Favre is a deity there. I mean, he is God. And Ted Thompson was saying, no followers, no Wisconsinites. He is not your God anymore. We're going to this other quarterback. You can't exaggerate it. It was unbelievable. And lo and behold, Aaron Rodgers is looked up. I mean, not to a Favre level, like you said. Favre's just a different stratosphere in terms of worship, but fans love Aaron Rodgers, and that day's gonna come. It comes for everybody when they're gonna have to move on from him, and it's their job to look for the next quarterback. And I think you brought up some great examples there, Jake. Like, it's easy to forget there were some signs last season where you kind of wondered, is he getting there? Is he getting closer? And they draft a quarterback, ticks Aaron Rodgers off. He plays incredibly well. He's buying into the offense, it seems. Things are going well. And if they get home field advantage, it's going to be awfully tough for anybody to waltz in the Lambeau Field, fans or no fans, and win. It's just, I'm going to tell you, it's a different cold out there, man. It's not like Buffalo. It's next level.
No, I was there in 2013 when they played against Colin Kaepernick, and it was – oh my God! It felt like 30 below zero at kickoff. It was insane. It was disgusting outside. And I looked up in the middle of the second quarter, and I'm thinking, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, why am I standing out here? This is ridiculous. But you make a good point. And I think something else that went into the Packers thinking, and they'll never admit it, but I think Zach Cruz of the Packers Wire words it perfectly. When you trade up to take a quarterback from Utah State, nothing against Utah State, but that's not Michigan. That's not Ohio State. That's not Alabama. When you trade up to take a quarterback from Utah State, that says at least something of how they evaluated their quarterback position going into the 2020 season. Now, like you mentioned, they're happy to be wrong because Aaron Rodgers is one of the MVP frontrunners going into week 16 of the 2020 season, may very well be holding a trophy as a Super Bowl MVP later in the season. But it's at least something that they thought was a possibility. And from that standpoint, if that's how they felt, that's where I think the quarterback selection is at least smart on that end of things. You mentioned you were there. You obviously see social media. What was worse, this year's draft night, or 2008? I will never forget. I was in a hotel. I was visiting Illinois State University when Mike McCarthy said the train has left the station. And I was 16 years old. And like you mentioned, Brett Favre was God. Brett Favre was my childhood hero. My heart legitimately broke that day. And I think the way that I've had it explained to me before, and I think it's apropos, is my life as a fan changed that day. That's when you realized it can happen to anybody. And I've seen it happen to anybody since then. Peyton Manning was cut by the Indianapolis Colts. Tom Brady is the consensus greatest quarterback of all time. And the New England Patriots said, no, thank you, and pushed him out the door, basically. They didn't even make him an offer that was worthwhile this offseason and pushed him out the door. And maybe they're regretting it now. I don't know if they are or not. I guess you'd have to get some truth serum into Bill Belichick to say if you're not. But what was worse, the day that happened or the day that Jordan Love was selected?
I think it's the former. I mean, granted, social media, it wasn't, a fraction than what it is now. God help us if Twitter was around that summer of 2008. But it was just crazy. I mean, just to be there, it was palpable. There was panic. There was shock, concern. I think that there were fans who were okay moving on from Brett Favre. I mean, definitely. It wasn't like 100%. I think I can vividly remember a lot of fans were like, you know what? This Brett Favre has kind of jerked these guys around, for 3-4 years. They've got to make a business decision as a franchise. But Brett Favre was Brett Favre. And it was, it was that was kind of the beauty of it. The fact that like Twitter wasn't a thing. I mean, it kind of was, but it kind of wasn't. The fact that you could just feel it at those training camp practices, it was an intensity to every throw, every rep that Aaron Rodgers took. It was like if he did anything wrong, my God, like they were going to let him have it. I mean, family night was unbelievable. He was, if I remember right, he had a terrible family night that summer.
It was horrible. Like legendarily horrible.
So it was, I would say definitely then it was a little more intense. But I mean, there's going to come, the thing is, like, it could get to that point, right? I mean, with Jordan Love, we haven't seen it yet. The draft is just kind of, they have the same agency, which is kind of interesting. Like, you wonder, like, what's going through Jordan Love's head? I mean, here's a guy, I mean, this is just me talking, not him, but like, he sees these other quarterbacks drafted in the first round. He wants to play right now for somebody. He wants to show what he can do. And he's going to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. Like, man, what the hell? Right. I got to wait. So I'm sure he wasn't thrilled about it himself at first. And here they are. They're both making the best of it. And that the best teams, the best GMs, they are callous. They don't care about sentiment and emotions and feelings. Like they'll just draft a quarterback. And if it makes Aaron Rodgers unhappy, I think that the way they know how Aaron Rodgers is wired, he's going to go out there and play the way that he's playing. Now, is that the case for every quarterback? Clearly not, because I mean, I've had people in Minnesota tell me that they believe the Vikings didn't really want to bring in a threat to Kirk Cousins because they worried kind of about his temperament and how he would kind of handle it. I don't know what to believe in Philadelphia. I mean, there's reports all over the place. It doesn't seem like Carson Wentz was that thrilled about Jalen Hurts being there. But the Packers, they know Aaron Rodgers better than anybody, and it's all kind of worked out.
And that kind of answers some of your question, doesn't it? Like, if your quarterback can't handle a little competition, then do you really have the guy that can win that for you? Right. If he can't handle somebody behind him, is he going to handle somebody running, face first into him, kind of thing? That's
exactly.
I think that's an interesting question and an interesting thought that you bring up there. I feel as a Carson Wentz fan and a family member, and my dad's an Eagles fan, so I feel for that entire situation. So
I love Carson Wentz too. I'm a believer, but there could be something to it.
I have no idea what they're going to do because the Eagles, from a salary cap standpoint, cannot trade him. But with the way Jalen Hurts has played, like if he has 2 more games like that, like he's played the last couple of weeks, how does he sit on the bench?
I mean, you haven't even entered that contract that you gave Carson Wentz, right? Nope. It kicks in next year. It's not ideal. It's like, Carson Wentz doesn't want to be a backup, but the Eagles, they don't want Carson Wentz to be a backup either. And that's kind of where we're headed right now.
No, and if you look at it, like the way I had this looked up was he's a $60 million dead cap hit if the Eagles let him go, trade him, whatever. The projected salary number that everybody's looking at is $175 million. So the Eagles are going to give him a third of the salary cap to play against him. I really sure the Eagles aren't. The Eagles and the Saints are maybe the 2 most fascinating teams to watch this offseason just because of their salary cap constraints and how they've continued to kick the can down the road to try and win now. So that'll be interesting. Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, not the only part of that story that you mentioned. My personal favorite portion of it, because he's one of the players I've had a chance to talk to, was Jay Sternberger, the professional shit talker, which is my favorite thing. So how does that story come about? The story with Clowney, the discussion from the playoff game, just take me through that whole thing.
Yeah, I love. Thanks a lot for bringing that up, Jake, because I mean that was probably my favorite part of the story. Just writing it and reporting it. It was Jay Sternberger was just awesome to talk to. I mean, I felt like we could have talked for hours, and it was the kind of conversation, on the beat for a little over 4 years that you rarely had with players. And granted, it was a fantastic locker room to be in. Just a lot of great guys, personalities, stories to tell. But think back through the playoffs. I mean, how often did you just see somebody on the Packers getting into it with a guy like Jadeveon Clowney with everything on the line? I mean, I can remember TJ Lang in that Cowboys game. I mean, that was a nice little skirmish, and they won that game. They get to the NFC Championship game. But that it just seems like the Packers just haven't had a lot of guys like wired like that. Just ass kickers, just shit talkers. And you know what? Once in a while, you have to draft that kind of player. And historically, Ted Thompson didn't draft that kind of player, and you need that kind of player to win in January. So that was kind of the point there. Yeah, like early on in that divisional playoff game, Sternberger says, "Look, it's almost like a magnetic pull. I got to go after the biggest, baddest, meanest guy on the team." It just happened to be Clowney that day. Kind of gave him a little leg whip. Clowney didn't like it. They get into each other's face, and it's that way the entire game. And I think Clowney was almost a little surprised, like, whoa, who's this guy? Where is he coming from? And Sternberger's telling him, I'm 10 toes down. I'm going to be here all day. And Bakhtiari's pulling him back. Hey, you still got 2 hours to go here. I don't know. Maybe people think, like, who cares? That kind of stuff happens in football. I don't think it's happened that often in Green Bay. They definitely need just an edge this January to win in January. And I think Sternberger is one of those players. I think they've got several of those players to win that kind of game in that kind of moment. And I just appreciate him being so open, so honest. And he got into, his background, losing his best friend at such a young age, just kind of shaped his vision. He lost one of his college coaches just this summer, tragically, in his 20s. So he's been through a lot, no doubt.
You mentioned that they have, several of those guys. First of all, something I really loved about it was he's a third-round rookie who's played like 200 snaps or something like that to that point. And that's Jadeveon Clowney, the former number 1 overall pick and this generational talent. So, from a fan standpoint, you love that. I would imagine, like you said, that Bakhtiari's pulling him back, but I think even a part of him would have said, oh yeah, I love that too. From that side of things. But you mentioned they have several guys like that. I mean, who are some guys that you think they have that bring that edge to the team? Because like you mentioned, Ted Thompson, one of the complaints that I think that a lot of fans had was that choir boy is, I think, a little bit too harsh of a criticism. But yeah, you mentioned, I mean, they had a lot of guys that just kind of went about their business. Clay Matthews is somebody who, he was a great player while he was in Green Bay, but did he necessarily have the edge that you're talking about? Maybe not. Sam Shields, kind of the same sort of player, a great player, but not that edge like you're talking about, like someone say like Charles Woodson, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I think that, it's Darius Smith. Like he's top 5, top 10 quarterback hits, pressures, dings you, lets you know he dinged you. He's got some attitude. It's one of those things that can be tough to quantify, right? Like, how do you kind of put a number to this effect? And I respect analytics and metrics and using numbers to kind of tell the story of football. That's just not me. I think that it's a very human game. It's played by humans. There's so much intangible involved in the game of football that I think we're kind of losing sense of because we have so much ability to just kind of put a number to something. And so, I can't really just say, that soft is a strong word, but there were moments in January where a very good team in the Packers appeared soft, at least softer than the team that was on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And it just seems with guys like this, and on the offensive side of the ball, Jamal Williams, I know somebody well, like he's dancing. That's your guy. Like, you know what? He's gonna have a dancing number. He's gonna put on a show. He likes to have fun, but like he's gonna run you over. Like he's gonna play with attitude. I mean, the word swag is in his handle on social media. He's got it to him, and it's kind of personality you need if you're gonna win this time of year. So I love it. They've got those players. Do they have enough of them in the NFC? I think so. I mean, who scares you that's going to walk into Lambeau and win? I guess the Buccaneers, because they smashed them early in the year, but to get them at home, it could be a different story. I think the Packers, they're the favorite to come out of that conference.
I tend to agree with you. That's an interesting thought. The Bucs are the one team I think you sit back and maybe have some pause, but they've declined a little bit since that time. And they're like a box of chocolates. You really never know what you're going to get out of that team. And obviously, anytime you walk into a playoff game against Tom Brady, the history is clearly there. But they are a mixed bag all season long for everything that they've done. A little personal, because you mentioned the human game and the human elements. The Packers are one game away from the Super Bowl last season, and then they go into the draft. And you've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what were your thoughts when they went quarterback, running back, fullback? Now, I know you said that when they drafted A.J. Dillon, you're not watching a whole lot of Boston College football. when they go through everything like that. But, or excuse me, I said fullback. He's a tight end. And I hate that the criticism is that he's a fullback because I say that all the time and it annoys the crap out of me when people say that. But they go quarterback, running back, tight end, 3 positions that they don't realistically need if you've looked at it. And the only guy that really played significant snaps was DeGuara, and that was before he got injured. But really, Dillon and obviously Love hasn't played a single snap. So, I mean, what were your thoughts on that as it happened throughout those first, 3 rounds?
Yeah, I think that kind of plays into the whole thinking of Ryan Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur. I think Matt LaFleur's fingerprints were all over this draft too. I mean, I know he did a ton of work on Jordan Love, talking to everybody he could about this quarterback. So they knew what they were getting into, both of them. I think it's building 2 teams within one. They knew that they had a team that could contend now, and they knew they had the luxury of building a team underneath that team that could win in the future. Look, Aaron Jones just changed his agent. He left Steinberg, went Drew Rosenhaus. Who knows how much money he's asking for? I hear it's quite a bit more than the Packers are willing to pay him.
And Alvin Kamara are the names that I've heard. So, I mean, that's a lot.
It's a lot of money. And if you're the Packers, are you going to use that money on a running back, or are you going to use that money to pay some linemen, to pay up for some defense when you've got Jamal Williams, when you've got A.J. Dillon? So I think that's the thinking there with A.J. Dillon. Matt LaFleur was with Derrick Henry in Tennessee. A.J. Dillon, you look at, I don't want to overemphasize the combine and workout numbers, but 40, bench, vertical, broad, everything was better than Derrick Henry. And he's the same size. You just don't see physical specimens like A.J. Dillon in the sport of football. It's insane what he can do and what he could do in the NFL. I think it's encouraging that, a carry here, a carry there. When you see him, they just haven't needed him yet. I really think that he's this potential just stud on ice that they're just kind of letting develop, letting grow. And then one day we'll see A.J. Dillon in a big way. I tell you what, just talking to him at length, you're not going to have an Eddie Lacy situation. And granted, there are a lot of factors into Eddie Lacy's decline. We could spend an hour talking about him, from the traumatic childhood with Hurricane Katrina kind of robbing him of his childhood and never really getting over that, having that emptiness inside. I mean, when we got together there at Republic Chop House in Green Bay, you could sense it. There was a hurt in Eddie Lacy from all that, to his eating problems. He opened up to that, to ESPN, just an unbelievable story there years later. A lot going on. But however you slice it, Eddie Lacy was very, very good at football. I don't know if Eddie Lacy committed and loved football nearly as much as a guy like A.J. Dillon does. Here is somebody who has the same kind of size, even better, and is going to commit himself to using that for good, for destruction on the football field like A.J. like Eddie Lacy did for 2 years, but then he fell off the face of the earth. It's sad. He could have been a legend there in Green Bay. A little soon to call A.J. Dillon a legend, but I think there's potential there for big, big things out of him.
That's that human side of things that you were talking about right there, right? I mean, Eddie Lacy obviously is – I remember the Lambeau crowd just – and it was interesting because obviously this is a team that's been built around for almost 30 years. Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, the passing game, throwing bombs down the field, and just hearing the crowd chanting, Eddie, Eddie, whenever he'd get a carry. And I could tell you – as much as I like Aaron Jones, and obviously I've gotten to know Jamal Williams pretty well, watching Eddie Lacy run the football was as fun as anything I can remember. In that 2-year period, he was as good as it was. And that 2014 Packers offense is probably the most well-rounded Packers offense that we've seen. And that's with all due respect to that 2011 offense, but that was a one-trick pony, but it was a hell of a trick, obviously, on that side of things. So you mentioned building, you were going to say something. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I just totally agree with you. I mean, because I think if you can remember up to 2014, between 2011 and 2014, I think the problem the Packers had was, teams started sitting back with 2 safeties after 2011, and the Packers just didn't have the running back to take full advantage of it. James Starks had a lot of injuries. He might have been able to. Alex Green showed some potential, but just didn't pan out. They had Cedric Benson for a little bit, and he was looking like that player.
Yeah.
And then he gets hurt. He's out for the year. They just kind of went through all these different players, and then Eddie Lacy comes in, and boom, you're right. I mean, that season, that team, It's too bad that they had the collapse they did in that NFC Championship game, because that was a team that could have won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we don't need to go through that. I've relived that way too many times in my life.
Yeah.
Were you there?
I was. It was the last game I covered at the Journal-Sentinel.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm sorry. That's unfortunate that it turned. I mean, I guess that's a great story, but
it was unbelievable, man. I mean, I'll never forget, like, just that locker room, just seeing Brandon Bostic sitting in his locker, and you just, you felt for the guy. Even at the back check, in the moment, in the press box, like, you could tell, like, when that happened, like, this guy could be known for this for the rest of his life. Like, you could just feel it, the game slipping away. And in the locker, he's just sitting there and he's just kind of going through his phone, and it's like, oh my God, like, what could he possibly be seeing on his phone right now? And to his credit, I've never seen, in my lifetime as a sports reporter, I've never seen somebody handle like the worst moment in their life as an athlete with such grace, like as Brandon Bostic did. I mean, I think a PR official kind of pulled him away after a few minutes in the locker room, and then the next day in the locker room cleanup, he would have talked for forever. I mean, he didn't have anything to hide. He put it on him, explained what went down. It's sad. I mean, he obviously was in the wrong there, but like we said, it's a game played by humans. It was instinct. If you're in that position, you see the football. I don't know. I mean, I feel like any of us in that situation, even if your play is to block, right, or whatever it was, it's human nature to go for the ball. Like, I don't know. You feel for him, and it's too bad.
Yeah, and he actually had a friend of the program, the Unknown Packers podcast, Bryce Christensen. He opened up about some of the stuff that he saw, like you mentioned, some of the suicidal thoughts and stuff that he had. It was really powerful. If you guys, everybody listening, has an opportunity to listen to some of that stuff, that was pretty empowering to listen through. Something that you've talked about was kind of the way that the rookies have sat and everything like that. And something that you mentioned with the coach's fingerprints and all that stuff all over it. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have, since Brian Gutekunst arrived and Ted Thompson left, is that when Ted Thompson was the general manager, rookies not only were expected to contribute, they had to. That was the only form of acquisition that the Packers brought in. Since Brian Gutekunst became the general manager, the Packers have had one rookie that has started on his first day of training camp, and that is Darnell Savage. Jair Alexander and Elton Jenkins became contributors very early and very quickly, but they were not day one starters. Have you seen some kind of shift in the way this team is thinking, and do you think maybe that can contribute to maybe some of those smaller mistakes being made less in the first, one and almost two full seasons of the Matt LaFleur era?
It's a great observation. I hadn't even really connected those dots looking at this roster, since I left. But it makes a lot of sense because they needed veterans in those playoff moments. I think you're going to kind of lean on some veterans, put them in those starting roles early on, make the rookies earn it a little bit to get into that position. And how many times did you just see, gosh, I mean, the Packers go into these crucial playoff games with players that really shouldn't have even been on a roster because
Andy
of the
Malumba
emphasis.
Starting at an edge position again. I mean, nothing against Andy Malumba, but that's like the poster child for me. Him and Dayton Jones were starting at edge against San Francisco in a home playoff game once.
At least Dayton Jones is, a first round pick. I mean,
but he was playing out of position.
Right, out of position. You're right. But and MD Jennings, who another great guy to talk to in that locker room. But MD Jennings, John McMillan was a bad pick. Gosh, I mean, outside linebacker. Remember how they just couldn't find somebody to get pressure opposite Clay Matthews, and it was like they were cycling through on the Vixa Otos and the Frank Zombos and Malumba and anybody they could find. I mean, Nick Perry was good for a little bit, but they never could find that player. So to just sign veterans, play veterans, guys that have been in those playoff moments is absolutely huge, and I think that gives you some hope this year too. It's a good blend, it seems, of ages out there.
Speaking of Matt LaFleur, obviously December 2nd, 2018 is kind of the turning point for this franchise. That's the day that they fired Mike McCarthy, and kind of a turning point in your career too, which we can get to in just a little bit. But the Packers fire the head coach. One, did you think there was any chance in hell that – I think everybody knew that the coach was getting fired at the end of the season. I think we all expected that. But did you think there was any chance in hell he was getting fired during the season?
Yeah. You know, it
Really?
was bad.
Wow. Okay.
It was pretty bad. Just I'm thinking back to that game, and Arizona, right? I
They were
mean,
the worst team in the NFL. I remember that.
yep. And it was, you can just remember sitting in that press box, and it just seemed like things could be going south, and that offense would just turn it on. I mean, it was at some point they just kind of get it to fifth gear and go and just outscore teams. And there was none of that. I mean, it was just stale. It was dead. It was time to move on. It was rock bottom. I mean, really, it was. It was time. And I give the Packers credit for just doing it then. Why kind of string this along and play out the streak if you don't have to. You gotta move on because it was that bad.
Interesting. Okay. So since that time has happened, just kind of tell me a little bit how, because obviously you've seen it. Teams have fired coaches and then hired the wrong guy. Obviously, when you were in Buffalo, they fired guys and they hired the right guy. They hired Sean McDermott, and the Bills are obviously in a good position. Maybe the best team in the AFC, not named the juggernaut that is the Kansas City Chiefs. But there are teams that also hire the wrong guy and then end up in football purgatory. I say this all the time. The Packers were this close to doing that. And they fire Mike McCarthy, who obviously has a street named after him in Green Bay. He'll be in the Packers Hall of Fame one day. Won a Super Bowl with the Packers. He's maybe the best coach in the history of their team, not named Vince Lombardi. That's certainly a plausible argument, I guess, that you could make in the modern era, obviously excluding Curly Lambeau. Once that happens, just how important is that coaching hire? And from what you know about how those hires are made, how difficult was it? Because Matt LaFleur was like, when he was hired, everybody just kind of went, what the hell?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's huge. I don't know. I've never been in that position, but it can go one or two ways really fast. I think there's you see a lot of owners and GMs kind of go one or two directions. You go for the offensive mind, you go for somebody who's innovative, who's at the cutting edge of things, and that particular offseason seemed to be that wave, right? I mean, it was like if you knew Sean McVay, if you're pouring his coffee in the morning, you're going to get a coaching interview. So that was the wave. And then sometimes it's the CEO type approach, somebody who's going to oversee everything, who's really really organizationally strong, like a
John
Joe
Harbaugh.
Judge. Yeah, I'm sorry, John Harbaugh, like a Joe Judge with the Giants. I mean, everybody just raves about him as somebody who just kind of oversees everything really well. And you've seen that hire too, where I think maybe the Packers did kind of hit the jackpot. Matt LaFleur seems to be doing both pretty well. I know he's young, but I think that kind of helps him relate to the younger player in a way that Mike McCarthy could not. I can just still remember some players saying, yeah, I mean, a lot of guys did love Mike McCarthy. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of guys that are like, he just, that relationship isn't really there. When he's showing videos to the entire team and trying to make a point, it could fall flat. And, I don't think Matt LaFleur is doing many things that fall flat with this team. I think there is an advantage to being young and being a smart, innovative guy who's going to use misdirection, who's going to motion, who's going to do different things on offense, who's going to have this complex rushing scheme. And I think he checked every box, and Mark Murphy made a fantastic hire. I mean, I don't know why we're not talking about him for Coach of the Year sometimes. I think he's done an unbelievable job.
So that was my next question. How do I get him more? Because it seems like last year you would think a guy who's the coach of the oldest franchise in NFL history, who resurrects the Packers from 6-10, essentially. I'm going to call the tie a loss because it might as well be. From 6-10 to 13-3 should be a slam dunk for Coach of the Year. But Matt LaFleur never seems to get mentioned in, and granted, I mean, I'm basing this off of what I read. Maybe he is in league circles or something. I don't know. But he never seems to get mentioned in the same breath as those guys like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. And Matt LaFleur has, granted, he does have the qualifier of he coaches Aaron Rodgers. So, I mean, obviously that put the degree of difficulty. I mean, I would argue maybe his degree of difficulty was a little different because he had to get 12 to buy in, which, as you mentioned, and maybe this is a good transition to our next point here, but that I think makes things a little more difficult. But what do I got to do to get this guy a little bit more respect in the national circles? Does he just have to win this year's Super Bowl?
It's a great point. I couldn't agree more with how you view that relationship with the quarterback. I mean, objectively, it was bad between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy at the end. There was no arguing that. It was very bad. And plays come in and plays aren't run. And guess what? Maybe Aaron Rodgers was right because there just was no creativity. It was stale when you don't have Donald Driver and Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb in those one-on-one matchups that McCarthy would design. And it's, rookies, untested guys. It's just not going to work out. So you can make the case that what Aaron Rodgers was doing was sound, was for the best interest of the team. And you can make the case that you should respect your coach. You should do what he says. That's a tough situation to walk into if you're Matt LaFleur. Unbelievably tough. He comes in with a new scheme, a new offense. Is Aaron Rodgers going to buy in? I mean, that was a legit concern. And I know a lot of fans love to shred Greg Jennings, but I thought he put it perfectly. As much as Aaron Rodgers has been a part of the problem, he can be a part of the solution if he just kind of buys in and is rejuvenated. And guess what? He looks rejuvenated for the most part. Sure seems like he's buying into this new offense. I will say last week it seemed a little odd that they were throwing the ball with the lead they had against the Panthers, and start to wonder what's going on there when you can just kind of run and win and get the heck out of there. But overall, things obviously took a turn for the better, and that should definitely give Matt LaFleur more consideration for Coach of the Year, because that relationship has been, by all indications, great, at least publicly.
Well, you were nicer than I was. I said there was no reason to attempt a pass in the second half if you're running for 8 yards a crack. So unless
you're trying to get somebody the MVP award, Jake, who knows?
Well, if that's the case, then I believe that's how Mike Holmgren lost a Super Bowl in Green Bay. He was trying to get a quarterback an MVP award instead of just giving the ball to Dorsey Levens. But
oh my God, that's true. Remember that?
Yeah. I don't know if that's ever been. That's a story. I was 6 years old when that happened, so I've read stories about that. I don't know like how true that is, but I believe I've read. Legend has it in Green Bay that Mike Holmgren basically said at halftime, "Okay, we're gonna win. Now I just need to make sure Four gets the Super Bowl MVP because Desmond Howard got it last year, and I want to make sure that my quarterback gets his leg." It's so weird that stuff. You think?
Yeah, I don't mean you never know, but I mean. At the very bare minimum, like if they just needed to give the ball to Dorsey Levens. I mean, he was doing whatever he wanted to that season. So, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the whole overall, all that stuff was just strange. And you made the point. I think you mentioned with Greg Jennings. I think the problem that you read was people only read half of that sentence, and they said 12 is part of the problem, and then they cut off the rest of it. And then the other part is he could be part of the solution, which he clearly has been the last 2 years. He's an MVP candidate again. And why? Because of kind of some of the things that Jennings was saying, playing within the offense, playing on time. Now, some of the points that you made and mentioned were not received the nicest by Packers fan base.
By the quarterback himself.
By the you're right. You're right. By the quarterback himself. So take me through that. I don't want to go through the whole story, obviously, because it's been a few years, but what was that like your whole life, obviously, when the quarterback takes a story of yours and essentially takes a dump on it on national media and everybody and their mother, obviously, when it comes to, I don't know if you know this, but if a fan sees journalist versus quarterback of favorite team, you're probably not going to win that one. What's that like?
It was expected, number one, right? I mean, there's a pretty high-ranking member of that front office that was a source for this story, which, by the way, yes, there were anonymous sources because there are people in the organization who would like to answer questions truthfully in a manner in which they won't be called irrelevant by Aaron Rodgers and never be able to walk into Lambeau Field again because they'll be booed out of Wisconsin. So, there is that factor as well. But he said, look, like anything negative, it just hurts him. It could be in the press, and his point being like, it is strange, that this dude is like one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and he's like, something very small written about him by somebody could hurt him. And his point being like, that's kind of part of the greatness too. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. Like he's always looking for that edge that you can find a grudge. And it wasn't Greg Jennings or Jermichael who talked about that grudge. Ryan Grant pointed that out. Like, look, he didn't like that Alex Smith thing pretty early on. That relationship wasn't that great to begin with. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's expected. I think a lot of fans, when the story came out, were enjoyed learning more. I mean, really, the whole impetus for the story was from that Cardinals game that we're talking about. You see this game from afar. You see the coach get fired. I literally just went through, my sources that I had from the beat and just asked people, what happened? What the hell happened? How did it go from point A to point B? Now, I wasn't there for a couple of years. What happened? And the answers kept coming back to the coach, to the quarterback, that relationship. And you put the story out. I think fans, by and large, love to learn more about what the hell happened. And as expected, the quarterback speaks his side of the story. I felt no need to respond. I mean, the story can stand on its own, and that was that. I mean, I was perfectly fine the whole time. I remember I was just hanging with my brother, my wife, our dog. We didn't have our daughter at the time. I think the national championship game might have been that night or the day after. We watched a little basketball, and you just turn Twitter off for a few days, which is good for the soul in general.
Not a bad idea. So yeah, I tend to be on the sensitive side of things. So maybe I could take a few notes from that, because I've always wondered. I always tell my mom, do not read the comment section, because she's the one who always gets the angriest, and there's always somebody. So I've never had a.
Yeah, you can't be worried about. I hear you, but it's like, I get it. Like, look, there was some stuff written in there and some reporting that is going to touch the nerves. I'm not oblivious to that. When several people are talking about the head coach kind of checking out and maybe getting a massage to miss an offensive meeting, like that is going to touch a nerve. So, yeah, I mean, no shocks across the board.
No. And then you get the other bits in that story of, the quarterback maybe changing a play or not running a play, or, all that stuff obviously makes, nerves to be touched. I think that's the best way to do that. Speaking of the quarterback, you said the other day, you posted a video of a quarterback in Kansas City and said he was the 2020 NFL MVP. And that is going to touch some nerves in Wisconsin as well. So are you trying to burn every single bridge you have? No, I'm kidding. No.
I haven't gone full heel, I promise. He's been great. Aaron Rodgers has been amazing this year. Like, you can't argue that. He has been.
So my first question, do you have a vote? Have you ever had a vote?
I have not. So, what I say doesn't really matter.
Okay. Mine doesn't either. I've gone back and forth. I said going into this Carolina game that I thought Rodgers was the MVP front runner because he was coming off a really good game. And at this point, you're kind of, splitting hairs, right? Picking between these two guys. But then Rodgers doesn't play that great against Carolina. And then Mahomes plays pretty well against New Orleans. And you kind of go from there. My question is, if you have a vote, are you voting with the word valuable, or are you voting like the most outstanding player? Is he the best player having the best season? Because that's where I think we have some disconnect as far as the voting. Because if you say the most valuable player and who has the most value to his team, in my opinion, I think if you take both players away from their respective teams and put a replacement level quarterback on their teams, that the Chiefs finish with a better record than the Packers. And by that token, I think Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. But if you go with the most outstanding player, I think you can have a better argument for Mahomes. So if you have a vote, how do you vote? What's your thought process on saying that Mahomes is the NFL MVP? I think I just answered the question for you by accident.
No, I disagree. Don't worry.
Okay.
Big picture, I just feel like we're going to look back. I know I've said this before, but I feel like we're going to look back at this era and wonder why in the hell Patrick Mahomes didn't win it every year. I think he's just that special. He's going to be the greatest player of all time. He's changing the position before our lives. I don't think any of this is hyperbole. And when you watch him week in and week out, he just does something that just shocks you. And yeah. I mean, does Aaron Rodgers have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Sammy Watkins and, no, but he's got some pretty good weapons. He's got Devontae Adams and MVS and Alan Lazard are better than they get credit for. I mean, Bob Dunne, he should have made the Pro Bowl, right? He got
the best offensive line in the NFL. I mean, people don't use that as a weapon. We never talk about that as a weapon, but the best offensive line in the NFL, that absolutely matters. And it's
That's totally. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. Like, if you, like, granted, I think the Chiefs have better weapons, but the Packers have a better offensive line, and I don't think it's even close. So, what's more
better running
important?
backs too. I mean, whatever
Totally.
that matters to you, but their running backs are better. Like Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are both better than Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell.
So I don't know. I mean, if you were to take them both out of their offenses, I think we're just like in our brains trained to think the Packers would just, be terrible because of, was it 13? The Seneca Wallace, Scott
Scott
Tolzien, Matt
Tolzien.
Flynn,
Yep,
charade.
that was fun.
It was fun. I mean, hey, Matt Flynn in that game against Dallas was unbelievable. I mean, that comeback, like he can live on that game for the rest of his life.
I'll
But
buy him a drink if I ever see him in Green Bay for that reason alone. I can promise.
so I think because of that, like we think that the Packers 7 years later would just fall apart without Aaron Rodgers. I mean, and granted, he got hurt again, but I think Matt LaFleur, the roster they built, they would be a little more equipped to handle it than they were back in the day. So I don't know. I just think that, Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen and Derrick Henry and whoever else you want to throw in there, you're talking about Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, all those other players that just, never really were able to win a ring because of Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan should have won every MVP that he played, just like Mahomes probably should win every MVP that he plays.
I agree with you on the standpoint of I think Mahomes is the best player in the sport. I don't think there's any question. I think he's the most talented player to ever play the position, and I know that's crazy to say in his third season as a starter. He's phenomenal. The only flaw I could think of is that he puts ketchup on his steak, and
It's awful.
That's disgusting and a perfectly good waste of a piece of meat. So, Pat, if you're listening, we need to talk, buddy. That's horrible.
I'm sure he is, and you know what? When you talk to him and bring him on, bring me on. We got to really grill him on that.
I was going to say that was pretty rough there too. So we won't give you too much flack for that. I've got two more for you, a little bit of rapid fire, and then we'll let you go. I've taken you almost twice as long as I promised I'd have you, so I apologize for that. But you've covered both. I have to ask you the same question I ask everybody when it comes to the Packers. But Rodgers or Favre, who is better between those two?
Oh my gosh. I think that the era of quarterback play in the 1990s was like the last just violent physical era that position was. I mean, the Troy Aikmans, the Steve Youngs, the Brett, these guys just had the snot beat out of them every week for 3 hours. And I think that you kind of have to take that into consideration. It was a different time. So if you're going to put their numbers side by side, I think that's what I'm getting at. And the larger than life stuff that we were talking about earlier. I mean, Brett Favre is the one who woke up this dormant franchise, along with Ron Wolf, Mike Holmgren, and everybody. But I mean, this team was in a bad place when he became the quarterback, and he completely turned it around. And that has to mean something. I think it's Favre.
Wow. I don't get that answer very often. So I do think if you are going to give that answer, that's probably the best way to frame it. Because, yeah, you're right. If you want to talk about Rodgers came into a situation that was pretty couched, if you think about it. Like everything here was already pretty established as far as the winning culture of the organization. Bob Harlan had already done everything to transition into Mark Murphy and all that stuff, which I'm kind of bummed we didn't get a chance to get to that. But Mark Murphy, I think, is somebody who definitely deserves some credit. He was kind of public enemy number one around here for a while with how he handled the Favre stuff. And then he changes the structure that everybody is kind of worried about, but it clearly hasn't been a problem. Obviously, the Packers have been very successful the last 2 years. That's probably a big reason why. But, okay, it is December 23rd as everybody's listening to this. Super Bowl Sunday. Who's playing and who wins?
All right, let's go. Oh man, I'm on Game On Wisconsin. So I mean, if I don't pick the Packers, right? I mean,
You've already crapped on the Packers like every opportunity. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I think I did say that. They're kind of in the driver's seat with home field. So I'm not as quick to dismiss Drew Brees as like over the hill. I think there's going to be some rust, and he's going to get Michael Thomas back. That defense is the backbone of that team. It's really hard for me to see Drew Brees or even Tom Brady at 42, 43 years old walking into Lambeau Field when it's negative whatever degrees. You mentioned that 2013 game. I can still remember the day after, me and my buddy Justin Felder, we went out to watch the college football championship. I think Jameis was playing downtown Green Bay. We were like the only people out. I mean, it was like violently cold, like stay in your house, shelter in place cold.
Yep.
And I think we left at halftime. We had to run our cars for like a half hour before we could even leave. It was like negative 48, no wind chill. Unbelievable.
I was in college that year. That was my senior year at Wisconsin Green Bay. So that following year was the Clinton Dix everything draft that we did everything. And there was a record set that year for most consecutive days on campus that were below zero. And that number was in the 20s. So like 20 plus consecutive days below zero. And we had to walk to class uphill both ways every day.
Of course. But I mean, I know Brady's played in some cold games himself, but like I just have visions of Brett Favre, in that 07 NFC Championship game. He didn't want to be out there in that cold. I think maybe Rodgers is just young enough and just used enough to the cold to actually play pretty well if it's like that at Lambeau that time of year. So let's go Green Bay in the NFC, Kansas City in the AFC. And since I just drooled all over Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs are your Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, I got a hard time arguing against that. Kansas City, you want to talk about a run. If they go, that'd be 18-1 after going Super Bowl champs last year. That would be phenomenal. Is Buffalo the best one to upset that apple cart, or is there another team you could see knocking them off? Because I think Pittsburgh's cooked.
Pittsburgh seems done. You're right. I like the Titans. I think, defensively there's some major question marks, but they can do whatever they want on offense. I'm not ready to count out the Ravens. I mean, Lamar Jackson's back. Like, he looks like MVP Lamar. I'm actually writing on him tonight for tomorrow at Go Along, if I can just plug that. Folks can check it out. Talk to his private quarterback coach today, and just to try to figure out, is he back to where he was? And man, his health is good. I think COVID hit him harder than anybody realized. He had no sense of smell, no sense of taste, was sleeping all the time. I think the fact that he just didn't have chemistry with Marquise Brown, they didn't really work out a ton together, that didn't help. I think we all thought they trained a lot together because there was a picture out there on social media. It was just a couple days. And, injuries are all around. The COVID ravaged the roster. Finally, they're themselves. Finally, he's himself. They can beat any – he's just a player that I don't know how you defend him. I guess you try to make him be a passer, but even then he might run all over you. They have a shot, I think.
They might be the most talented roster in the NFL, like top to bottom. If you think about it that way, they are, in my opinion, the best organization. Kansas City certainly has an argument with the way they've done things last year, but the best run organization, I think, top to bottom in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens are definitely towards the top of that list. The AFC South, you mentioned the Colts and the Titans, both of those teams. I will not be surprised if either one of those teams are playing on Championship Sunday. I also will not be surprised if both of those teams are one and done. I have no feel for that AFC South at all. I've seen the Titans look like world beaters, and I've seen the Titans get dusted by the Cleveland Browns, who I think are pretenders. I cannot wait to bet the house against them on Wild Card Weekend. With all due respect to Browns fans, I root for them, but it's a tough division, them winning a game. So I can't. You didn't say the Buffalo Bills?
I don't know. I mean, Josh Allen has definitely been the most improved player in the sport. The defense that looked really bad in September is making the plays when they have to make them. I just can't get that Houston game out of my mind a little bit. That wild card game for Josh Allen last season, the bomb that Patrick DeMarco, the lateral pitch 40 yards downfield. He threw two passes that could have been pick sixes. It was ugly. I know he's a totally different quarterback since that game, but the playoffs are a different story. It's a different world. Let's see how he does in the playoffs.
This is that again. It goes back to that human thing you were talking about again, and that's why if the Cardinals get into the playoffs, that's the kind of game I think you're going to see Kyler Murray have in the first round. And the Cardinals, because they're talented enough, might have a chance to win against a team like New Orleans or Seattle or whoever it is that ends up with that 2 seed. But that first playoff start, and you've seen it. I mean, Aaron Rodgers never throws interceptions. Aaron Rodgers' first career pass in the postseason is an interception. And they were down like 38-10 or something stupid like that throughout the course of that game. It was ridiculous. So you covered that game, right?
That was right before I came, a little bit
Okay.
before. But yeah, that was a wild one. I remember watching, I mean, instant classic, even though, they'd missed the face mask there at the end.
Well, whatever. The next season ended okay. And then were you on the
Yeah.
beat that year?
Actually, it was right after that year, right after the 2010 Super Bowls when I started into the
Okay.
lockout.
So
Yeah.
your first, okay. So that was interesting. Then covering a lockout and then obviously maybe the best regular season team that the Packers have seen. So
Yeah.
he's Tyler Dunne. He's Go Long. You can find him subscribed, like we mentioned, for less than a cup of coffee if you guys are Starbucks drinkers. Ty, we've had you for over an hour. Appreciate you. He said the Chiefs over the Packers in the Super Bowl. He said Patrick Mahomes was the MVP. Basically said the Packers suck here for an hour. That's okay. Check out his story if you haven't on the Jordan Love succession plan. It is incredible. It's a lot of fun. And it's not just about Jordan Love. There's stuff in there about A.J. Dillon, stuff in there about Jay Sternberger, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Alan Lazard, Jamal Williams, a bunch of stuff in there about this Packers team really as a whole. And something, like I said, that you kind of mentioned earlier about learning more. Anytime you read something that Ty writes about the Packers, you learn a lot more and you get a lot of insight on the team that you guys love to read and watch about. So check that out. You can follow him on Twitter at Ty Dunne. That's Dunne. And of course, subscribe to his stuff. And then you can follow us. We're on Twitter at GameOnWI. Ty, thanks for joining us. Anything else you want to plug before we sign out?
I think you did a hell of a job there, Jake. Thanks for the love. And yeah, golongtd.com, right on Twitter, anywhere you want to find us. Subscribe, and my family and I would be eternally grateful. So, gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah, he just had a baby too, so he needs your guys' help as much as he can. So there you go, guys. If there's any other reason that you can think of this holiday season, that would be the perfect gift to give somebody. So thank you guys, and we will see you guys next time.